Control Echo 1, all in order here.
Five. Any other stations that want to check in on hotel 1? So standing by over.
Okay, so somebody else has joined. Unmute. Yeah, I am unmuted. All right, do you want to unmute and just let's have a look and see if your audio comes up?
Hi, I'm sure it does.
Hi, who's that?
Name's Nakala from Radio Corp.
All right, you're going to have to say that slowly so that I can pronounce it.
Nakala.
Nakolo.
Yes.
Fantastic. Good evening. How are you?
Good, thanks, and yourself.
Good, good. I don't know who else is going to join us. I think the public holiday might have blown that one out the window as well.
Yeah.
Even though most people said they'd like to have the meeting tonight instead of last night. So. Okay, let's see. I've just sent it out there. Yeah, affirmative control, Echo 1, all in order. Thanks, over.
Opportunity for late checking. Control standing hotel 2 over.
Okay, guys, I'm going to give it another minute or two, and then we'll start. Even if it is just with the two of you, that's fine. It's not a problem. I can do this on multiple levels, so I'm sure we'll be able to move forward. And I think also that once we're done with this one, if you guys also just provide some feedback on the groups and help stimulate, but you'll understand why I make that statement up front. So let's just give it another minute or two and wait for the check-ins to finish, and then I'll begin. 1010, if you're still on Hotel 1, your connection died. Okay, I'll see you back up. Not a problem. Thanks a lot. All right, so Segi and Cindy, you guys dropped out there for some reason, and then our new participant also dropped out again. All right, it's 10 past. Evening, guys, ladies, gentlemen. Cindy, I take it you're going to be monitoring in the background. Now I've got to try and pronounce your name again. Nicolo, I think it was. Just confirm if I got it right.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. Just having a look at some of the troubleshooting. Yeah, even though the fiber undersea cable is damaged, we seem to have a pretty good connection going through to Google in the States. So it's a bit strange that we might be dropping Zoom's connection tonight, which isn't a pleasant one at all, unfortunately. That being said, firstly, I'd just like to say thanks for those of you that have actually joined the meeting tonight. There is a recording in any event which I'll make available at a later stage. The one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to go through the introduction of myself or my background or disaster relief CERT, the acronym for Community Emergency Response Teams. Instead, I actually want to move us straight into basically one of the very first parts of disaster risk reduction and disaster management, or disaster relief and assistance within the disaster management cycle as a whole. And that is one of recruitment. Now, just briefly, Disaster Relief CERT, as a registered non-government organization, our prime and sole objective is, in actual fact, to prepare volunteers to be able to assist in times of a disaster. Now, I just want to say I'm not going to skew anything. I've got two screens. My visual is up on the left-hand screen. My camera is at the teleprompter between the two screens. So I have a tendency of looking at, where I expect to see faces and forget about the camera in front of me. Now, that being said, I also picked up, I've got something else on that screen that shouldn't be there, so let's move that out of the way. I see people are complaining about electricity going off again, which is, again, reason why this type of conversation needs to be held. Okay, so our our sole and principal object is to, in actual fact, prepare volunteers to be able to provide assistance to local communities in times of disaster. However, it's not as simple as just recruiting volunteers or ensuring volunteers understand why they need to, in actual fact, be registered with organizations such as Disaster Relief CERT. But there is a training aspect that needs to be carried out. And this is an area where the organization will definitely need the assistance of both registered volunteers and non-volunteers. And I'll explain and elaborate on that in due course. In addition to our sole and principal object, we definitely have a mandate to train volunteers. That's, as I've said now. But in addition to that, to also create awareness amongst communities of the potential risk of and the actual risks that do exist for disasters occurring and how it will affect the communities. So in order to do that, I want to just work through, I think the best way for me to work this module would in actual fact be to take a hypothetical. Now, because of the fact that we are based in Constantia Kloof, and of course Constantia Kloof is divided into two sections. We got the top of the ridge, i.e. From Nolene Street south towards Ondekkers Road, and then from Nolene Street north going down to Constantia Drive just before Weltevreden Park. Of course, both areas sandwiched between Golf Club Terrace on the eastern side and Christian de Wet and Jim Fischer on the western side, so to speak. Let us just take a hypothetical of this particular area called Constantia Kloof. Now, let's say, for example, that we do have a disaster. I'm not going to go into the various types of disasters. There's far too many of them to look at for this meeting in particular. But there are two potential risk factors. There's three actually, but the third one I don't want to discuss at the moment. The two major ones that I would like to utilize as part and parcel of role-playing and looking at a hypothetical situation within the community is one called an earthquake. And this is on the back end of several shakes that we have experienced in the last couple of weeks, which we have also felt here in Constantia Kloof. Some people call them tremors, others call them earthquakes. Some people refer to them as Zama, underground illegal mining, and all of these factors. So as far as that is concerned, let me just answer Angela here. Yes, we do. And why are you not on Zoom? There we go. So when we take a look at that potential risk of an earthquake, the thing that I would like to point out as part of the hypothetical, but based on a factual basis, the Nubian plate, in actual fact, which South Africa sits on, has got a fault line. Just give me a second, guys. There's that one. Zoom is open. Let me just move this through to Angela. She definitely wants to look at becoming a volunteer, but somewhere has missed the post. So let me just give this through to her quickly. All right. So basically, we've got a fault line, which, funny enough, not many people are aware of. And the fault line, for those of you that don't know who are watching the video, I'm actually on the corner of Christian de Wet and Ondekkers Road, right next door to Florida Veterinary Hospital. So the four corners that are actually here, or the landmarks that one could look at, is just north of me towards Beverly Road North, or Beverly Drive North, Beverly North for the correct term, is West Rand Eye Center. And then to the south of me on the Ondekkers Road side is Florida Veterinary Hospital. Then across the road from that, there is Florida Junction. That's the shopping center with the train in front of it. The corner across the road from that is the Netcare Medical Center. And then we've got that big block of flats on the fourth corner of that intersection. And it is crucial to understand the geography of this particular location, because that block of flats where we tend to see just a small portion of the flats, those flats go on for probably about 200 meters towards the west, down that length of On Deckers Road, and I never remember the name of the road opposite me here. But just beyond, within meters, just beyond the end of that block of flats, sits the earthquake fault line. And that fault line could, in actual fact, move. That plate could move to the extent that we in Constantia Kloof could be subject to one of the biggest earthquakes that we would, or tremors for that matter, that we could not imagine under any circumstances. All right. I'm not going to respond to that again. It's too much of a distraction. So basically, if there is a shift in the plate and an earthquake, a legitimate earthquake were to occur on this particular fault line, we would in actual fact feel it at, even a 2 or 3 could in actual fact cause structural damage to Constantia Kloof. That's point number one. Anything over the 2 or the 3 on the Richter scale, magnitude on the Richter scale, is most definitely going to bring down buildings in Constantia Kloof. We're right on top of the fault line. And we would be naive to think that nothing will happen. We are also naive to think that nothing can happen. This is the potential risk that we sit on just as far as an earthquake is concerned. The second thing is that we need to consider is the entire aspect of these adverse weather events which we have been experiencing over the last couple of years. In particular, these high winds come tornadoes that tend to come through the area and cause, even at this stage, small damage to places like Cradlestone Mall, Tembisa Hospital, moving out onto the East Rand, taking out various of the settlements and townships on the East Rand in particular. Now, those type of events can also affect us here in Constantia Kloof. Has anybody in this area actually stopped and thought for a minute that that type of weather can take off roofs? Once those roofs come off, those tiles, those metal structures, Spar's got them across the road from us. The garage has got metal structures. They got canopies and all of this. All of these things can, in actual fact, have a major impact on our community as a whole. Now, for the hypothetical, I'm only concentrating on Constantia Kloof. However, this can happen throughout Region C. And for those of you that don't know, the city of Joburg is subdivided into 7 regions, A to G, I think it is. Can't do my maths tonight. In order for them to have specific structures in each of the various regions. And the reason for this is that what happens out on the western side of Johannesburg, i.e. Region C, most definitely will be different to what happens in the southern parts of Joburg, moving down towards the Midvaal area. So the Midvaal area, for example, especially when you're looking at the Eikenhof Kibble Park area, they are susceptible to flooding, as is Eldorado Park. Whereas at this side of town, we're actually not susceptible to that type of flooding, even though on the 9th of December 2022, we were subjected to certain areas where flooding occurred. So those are the two things that I want to look at as role-playing and how it can actually affect us in this area. Well, as I've said, the earthquake, a shake of the buildings, the shake of the Constantia Kloof Ridge, there's a couple of things that can happen. Structural collapse. What do I mean by that? Quite simply, walls crumble, roofs falling on top of our heads. That happens at 2 o'clock in the morning. I can tell you now, those that have read my preliminary assessment, out of 4,500 residents in this area, 4,000 will probably lose their lives. And that just hold on a second. Angela, I'm busy in the meeting at the moment. I can't provide the info. Just you'd have to either phone 011 375 5555. I'll type it out quickly, but I am on the meeting at the moment. 375. Okay, so basically now, during the time of an earthquake, the buildings, the walls are going to collapse, the walls are going to crumble, roofs are going to drop in on top of us. We could lose 4,000 out of 4,500 people overnight, literally. 2 o'clock in the morning, majority of the community is... okay, that's Angela that joined. Good evening, Angela. Welcome aboard. We'll do audio and video test at the end of the meeting. So out of 4,500 people just in Constantia Kloof alone, 4,000 could lose their lives. That is how serious the disaster potential risk is and the level that it sits at. When it comes down to the adverse weather events, the same thing could in actual fact apply. Because of the fact that, one, when it comes to that type of an event, we could have an early warning. Now, remember, earthquakes, there's no actual warning period at all. All that happens is you get a shake, rattle and roll, and that's it. It's considered an earthquake once the society, the geological society has done the investigation. They will determine it was an earthquake. But when we get to adverse weather events, normally there's a bit of a warning period. That warning period can, in actual fact, get us to a point whereby we can save lives. And if we don't utilize the warning period, we're not going to save those lives. That could be lives of loved ones, friends, family, or otherwise, even colleagues at work. And just based on those two scenarios in particular, there are many, many factors that need to be taken into account in terms of disaster risk reduction. How do we in actual fact do it? Why do we do it? Why is it a necessity? Why is it a requirement? What do we need to do in order to understand how to reduce the risk of a disaster occurring? What all does it entail? And each question will then raise additional questions. Adverse weather conditions, well, you know, you can have a guy standing there at the bottom end of R28 and N14 or Hendrik Potgieter, and he looks up and he can see those clouds rolling in, and he can see the twister and everything else. And he can get up on WhatsApp and say, guys, there's a tornado headed in this direction or in whatever direction. What do we do with that information once we receive it? Better still, who is going to do what with that information when we receive it? Again, every question, or for every question, there's probably 20 other questions that are going to surface and need to be answered as well. And it is on this basis that I took the decision to uniquely place disaster relief CERT volunteers in a position of understanding hazard assessments and hazard vulnerability assessments. And in order to actually calculate and determine risk, community risk profiles, so that we could have some form of a structured gathering of information. And then from that information that is collected and that data that is collected, it is actually shared with the authorities such as City of Joburg disaster management, or Ekurhuleni disaster management, depending on which area the actual disaster area damage assessment is carried out and the risk analysis is carried out, etc. And in order to do that, this is why we need volunteers. A lot of people think, well, you know, if we are a disaster relief organization that is going to prepare volunteers to be able to assist, does that then not mean when a disaster occurs, our registered volunteers have to rush out and go and perform first aid and fight fires, or, as I've said in one of my manuals, swing from one building to another building on a shoestring like MacGyver used to do? Or what is it that we in actual fact need to do? Well, it's a combination of all. During times of a disaster, in Constantia Kloof, for example, me personally, I'm not worried about the volunteers in Constantia Kloof. They'll probably be dead. Yep, myself included. That's why it's important to have volunteers in Discovery, Helderkruin, Roodekrans, Veld, Vredenpark, Strubens Valley, Florida, Qualarina, Bergbron, Rand Park Ridge. In other words, in every single suburb. And in each and every single suburb or ward, we need X amount of volunteers to do something. The something is the big question, because not everybody wants to go and do first aid. Not everybody wants to go and fight fires. Not everybody wants to get involved in animal rescue. Not everybody is good with children. So let's look at what happens in those two scenarios of an adverse weather condition affecting Constantia Kloof, or even an earthquake affecting Constantia Kloof. The biggest one of all is the earthquake, because that earthquake could in actual fact bring this entire ridge down from Nolene Street. The whole of Nolene Street, that whole section, could actually find itself there on the other side of Constantia Drive in Vredenpark. And everybody included in those streets can be buried under the rubble, the mud, and everything else. So yes, we still need volunteers who are capable of providing first aid and saving lives. Being this side of town, the potential risk of gas explosions, where we've just seen, like with the Bree Street case, although that is a very unique incident. You know, the whole of the Joburg CBD and the southern parts of Joburg are fed by Egoli gas. And one would expect Egoli gas pipeline, or the natural gas pipeline, to be responsible for gas leaks. We don't have that gas this side of the November 1 at all. So from within the western side of the November 1, moving over to the borders of Krugersdorp and Magaliesburg and that area, Muldersdrift, we don't have natural gas actually within our street structure. But to the southern part of Krugersdorp, to the southern side of Florida, Vleerhof, Discovery, Witpoortjie, we actually have the Sasol gas lines that transport gas from the coastline, etc., and distribute it. But the underground natural gas is not there. That being said, there are still certain streets in and around this area where there are or were manhole covers in the streets, because there are servitudes. There are waste product piping that is running throughout our entire area. And with waste comes methane by default. And the Bree Street incident has just declared methane being the #1 cause of the damage to Bree Street alone. And if you take a look at that particular incident, where we might not be subjected, and I say might not be, I don't know, I actually cannot say that. That's why we as an organization need volunteers. because they need to determine whether we stand a risk of having that type of an explosion within our own community. Now, can you imagine, let's just take Golf Club Terrace, especially around that total garage. There's a couple of complexes there, and we have that type of an explosion in or under those complexes, and they all collapse on top of each other. Or the earthquake takes over the entire ridge of the mountain and drops it down into Weltevreden Park. Yes, we need first aiders that are going to be able to help. Yes, we need firefighters or those trained in firefighting that are going to be able to extinguish fire, or at least understand when not to try and extinguish a fire, to be more accurate. But then we're going to have a situation where people are going to find themselves exposed to the elements. My God, where'd my roof go? Yeah, Dr. Watson, what can we say? That weather condition actually took our roof off. Now, that weather condition or event could have brought torrential rains and waters and everything else, and everybody in the house, women, children, babies, are all subjected to the elements. They need to be taken care of. Now, I know that in our area here in particular, to the best of my knowledge, besides the school and the church, we don't have any other shelter facilities. So where are we going to move the Constantia Kloof residents to in an event like this? We need to be able to house them. Then we need to be able to feed them. We need to be able to get blankets and clothing and all kinds of other things. We need to be able to take care of any other chronic medical conditions. We need to be able to look at special needs and vulnerable residents of Constantia Kloof. What do we do with them? How do we transport them? How do we move them? How do we do this? How do we do that? Yeah, you wonder why I got no hair left. And when I let it grow, it's gray. It's because of all the how do we's. How do we do anything here? Well, as an organization, I can tell you we can't do a single thing at all. That's why we need you. We need you, the resident, throughout the country, to step up and take responsibility, not only for yourself, but your family, your friends, your colleagues, and the rest of the community. And to actually put yourself forward in such a way that you are prepared to undergo specific training in order to be able to assist organizations such as Disaster Relief CERT. You know, we got the South African Red Cross Society. I mean, they go back 150 odd years. We've got Gift of the Givers. And to be quite honest with you, those are the only two organizations that are actually boots on the ground trying to do something. There's a lot of other non-profit organizations that reach out in various other aspects, but they're not disaster relief related organizations per se. Will they be able to come in and assist? Well, that's debatable. Now, this is a statement that I upset the country on, and I always have and I always will, based on my previous background, because those other organizations, when they are presented with a disaster, they got no clue on how a disaster management cycle relief effort is undertaken or carried out, and they become a greater risk to the vulnerable post-disaster, and can be the cause of killing those people that they are trying to, in actual fact, save. Strong statement, but a factual one, unfortunately. And the reason for that is, out of the goodness of their hearts, and the same applies to ordinary residents of society, during times of crises, they all want to get involved and do something. And the problem is that a good analogy is during a motor vehicle accident, for example. Oh my God, the man is bleeding, or the woman is bleeding, or the baby is bleeding, and the baby's in the car seat, and the motherly instinct. Sorry, ladies, it's not that I'm being partial towards any gender, but the motherly instinct kicks in and says, I need to comfort the child. and they scoop the child up, and there the neck was damaged and they paralyzed for life. That is the consequence of reaching out with the goodness of one's heart. So how do we in actual fact deal with that? Ladies, your motherly instinct is crucial to the survival of the infant if done appropriately and with sufficient training to understand the risks of what you are doing. Many mothers, you know, the SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, where parents put the children, newborn babies, down in a crib, for example, or in a cot, pram, whatever, and then don't monitor the child on a regular basis. And the child suffocates. It's accidental, but it is traumatic. It's a loss of a life. And young moms need to go through, and that's where, as parents, we need to be informed as parents as what we should do versus what we should not do. And the same thing applies when it comes to disaster relief, disaster assistance, or providing disaster assistance times or assistance in times of disaster. We really need to understand what we are doing. My personal recommendation to communities is quite simply, if you have a passion or desire, or call it the motherly instinct to actually reach out and help and assist others, then register with an organization, undergo the training that they offer and they provide so that you fully understand what not to do. No, Chad, no. You're supposed to train people to know what to do. No. If you train them in knowing what not to do, you're going to save the life. Because if a person knows, don't scoop the child up from a baby chair in a car without carrying out certain steps, without checking certain things before you even touch the child, let alone move the child. If you know not to do any of this, you will save the child's life, especially if the child is sitting in that chair crying. That's the only time that crying is really appropriate as far as I'm concerned. Because that is the indication, hey, hang on a second. That child may be hurt, but that child may not be hurt. Do you see any blood? No, I don't see any blood. Then the chances are there's no injury here. But that child is scared shitless. Okay? But they are alive. Until we move them, we could in actual fact cause harm or damage or whatever the case might be. So if we train and if we as community members join organizations and learn what not to do, we will save lives. And then during that training that is given, we'll also learn what we should do. And then, and only then, can it be done in a disciplined and well-organized and well-mannered aspect of an operation. To give you an example, you set up an evacuation shelter. You don't just open the doors and let everybody rush in. But it's raining, Chad. Get them out of the rain. But Chad, the babies are going to get sick in the rain. Get them inside. No, you don't do that, because once you got them in, number one, you're not going to get them out. Number two, you don't know who's in there. Number three, you definitely don't know what is in there. I need to elaborate on that one. The correct manner, for example, of dealing with an evacuation shelter is you establish the shelter that's going to be utilized. You ensure you got security personnel, whether that be CPFs, neighborhood watchers, block watchers, Probably not SAP. SAP should be dealing with other things. Private security industry should be dealing with other matters. Could be volunteers, even registered disaster relief CERT volunteers who are just prepared to act as security or ushers or guards, or whatever name you want to give them. You make sure you got the appropriate writing material, pens, papers, everything else, and you set up a registration station before you let a single soul in. That way, when they enter, you get relevant information, and this becomes crucial to tracing of people and to know the actual number of people that were in the area versus the number of people that are left in the area, in order for the search and rescue personnel to have an understanding, or at least an estimate, of how many people they still need to look for. So you don't let everybody just rush in. It's chaos. What are they going to rush into? Then are you going to bring the males and the females in? Do you have toilets for both males and females? What about the breastfeeding moms? What are you going to do with them? Bring them in and let them breastfeed because you brought the guys in at the same time? Look, I know in certain cultures it's perfectly acceptable. In other cultures it isn't. So one has to be respectful of the needs of the victims of the disaster or of the incident, the survivors, whatever you want to term them. You need to take all of these things into account and consideration. And in order to do that, you need to, in actual fact, be trained in various disciplines, the different facets of disaster management and the overall disaster relief and assistance cycle. You also need to be able to know before the disaster occurs what could happen. Yeah, so let's put a poll out there. Guys, we got a tanker that's rolled over here on the corner of Christian de Wet and on Deckers Road, and the incident commander from fire orders an evacuation of Constantia Kloof. Which road are we going to evacuate or use to evacuate? Christian de Wet headed north. Golf Club Terrace headed north. On Deckers headed east. And then I got everybody on the group telling me I'm nuts, I'm crazy, and I need to see a doctor and a psychiatrist. I even had people on the group saying, you're ridiculous and childish, and left the group. And 3 months later, people are complaining about the tankers, the fuel tankers traveling up and down Pauline Street. Yep. That is the potential of Boksburg LPG tanker blast occurring right here on our doorstep. These are the things that we need to take into account, consider. We need to know the potential. What could happen so that we can move on to the how do we. Without knowing what could happen, we cannot get to a how do we. Because we sitting here and saying, no, life is lekker, dude. Life is so lekker. Like I said, during the KZN flooding, when part of the mountainside came down, and I put the image out on the Constantia Kloof and Surrounds group, and I said, guys, that could be part of the ridge in Constantia Kloof. And people came back to me, and one guy in particular said to me, no, there's too much rock. My general attitude, I'm not a very patient person. I'm accustomed to getting a problem. I'm accustomed to working in casualties and resus areas. And the patient comes in, and there's a categoric way that you're going to move forward, you're going to follow orders, you're going to carry out certain things, and that's the end of the story. There's no in-between discussion, whatever. If you are doing a differential diagnosis, that's a different thing altogether. But when that patient comes in and they got blue lips, you're not going to sit there and decide whether they've got blue lipstick on or not. You're going to upfront understand that there is an oxygen deprivation taking place of some nature that needs to be investigated. I thought, there's too much rock. Are you Superman? Have you got X-ray vision that you can see just how deep the rock goes in Constantia Kloof on top of the ridge? How do you know the groundwater isn't 1 meter below the surface and this entire area can get washed away? And then needless to say, on the 9th of December 2022, during that exceptionally high rainstorm that we had over the 24-hour period, we've had a mudslide right here on Constantia Kloofs Ridge. 7 units are evacuated. 7 families cannot utilize their complexes or their units within the complex. They've had to leave. They've had to find alternate accommodation. And now it's just one major legal issue with regards to bonds and all the rest of it. So we need to know what could happen. This is again reason why residents of all areas need to understand that they can play and will play a major and crucial role in assisting communities when they register as volunteers and undergo specific training. On the point of training, to give you an example, Angela, you were talking about loss of power. We had somebody else come up and they dropped off. They kept on dying. Unfortunately, I don't know who it is. I haven't seen if they've come back to me or which group they were on. Radio communications. No power, no cell phones, no internet. Wow, we don't even have an undersea cable. One of the cables is now going to take months to repair. No internet overseas. Radio communications, that's one part of preparedness. From our disaster relief CERT perspective, an induction training program. This is specifically to train you on who we are, what we are, how we integrate with the Disaster Management Act. What does the Disaster Management Act actually entail? Why we should prepare, why we should get involved. And then finally, without moving into the other disciplines of first aid and all the common firefighting, search and rescue, disaster area damage assessment. This course alone is going to be about 60 odd hours, if not more, including the practical session, because it is in this training that disaster relief CERT volunteers will be expected to do a full-blown risk analysis of their particular areas. So in Constantia Kloof on top of the ridge, I estimate we need 20 registered trained volunteers. On the bottom of the ridge, we need an additional 10. However, the bottom of the ridge is made up mainly of complexes. Each of those complexes should have a minimum of at least 5 trained people per complex. Why do I say 5? Well, quite simply, one that's going to be able to just take control of a situation, and the other 4 that are going to do the dog's body work, i.e. they might be the ones that might have to carry Granny from the 3rd floor down to the ground floor so that we can get them onto the back of a bakkie. Yeah, on the back of a bakkie to evacuate them. And if it is Mont Blanc, for example, well, the chances of getting the bakkie up top there is not going to be very good, especially if it's got other patients or other evacuees or residents on the back of it. So they might need to carry, and that can take 4 people. You know, Granny might need a ventilator or be on a ventilator or an oxygenator. You're probably going to need one or 2 people just to carry the oxygenator and the tubing. And, you know, if they're on IVs and that type of thing, and the other 2 or 3 people are going to actually have to carry the person. Yeah, I can get quite gruesome in this, eh? Damn. Why? Because that is what happens in a disaster. Not every volunteer is going to be able to get their hands dirty at that point. However, pre-disaster, before a disaster occurs, there's nothing stopping you. Segi, let me use you as an example, or Cindy. Cindy, you could in actual fact during pre-disaster planning undertake a disaster area or risk analysis and vulnerability analysis just within 3 blocks of your residential premises and properly document it and submit it. And that particular submission could in actual fact put us on a planning stage or phase, or put us in a position where we can in actual fact implement a specific plan, because you know the next 4 hours is down, you got this vulnerable person and 6 houses down, you've got another vulnerable person, and across the road from you, you've got a garage, for example, that carries gas tanks, and then you know, we've also got the potential risk of, but we know that there's this servitude, or there's this, or there's that, or there's this wall that could collapse, or whatever. I don't know. I really don't, because I can't walk around the entire Constantia Kloof and put the plan together. I need you. We as a community need you. Then when the disaster occurs, you might not be, and I'm using you, Cindy, as the example. You might be like me and hate the sight of blood. Therefore, you can't perform first aid. But I tell you what you can do. You can step outside of your front gate and you can look left. And you can look right. Bloody hell. And you can pick up the radio and you can call the control station and say, control, such and such a road is completely blocked from this direction and this intersection. The only way that you are going to get in here is to utilize the other intersection. Man, you know what you've just done? You've just given us the information that needs to be fed up to disaster management, so that disaster management know, don't send the ambulances down on Deckers Road to turn right into Golf Club Terrace, because when they in actual fact get to Bristow Street, it's going to be totally blocked off and they cannot go anywhere. You actually have to send them all the way around down William Nicol, bring them up through Checkers and bring them up Golf Club Terrace so that they can get to the Caltex garage that has just exploded. That's how you save lives. But, Cindy, you can do something else. You can walk down the street and you can determine the damage just in the street alone and report on that. And in so doing, you might in actual fact hear Oom Jan sitting there in the corner who was having a bra when all this happened, crying because his leg is stuck under the bra and he can't move. Control, we got a possible entrapment at this location. That is the purpose of disaster relief CERT volunteers. One of the purposes. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to do this. Any person over the age of 16 is capable of undertaking this training and having a pretty broad concept of what to do, but more specifically, what not to do during times of a disaster. I can go on for hours on the subject, but I'm going to leave the next couple of minutes open for some questions, and we're going to do a follow-up session. I would like to close off by saying another area that volunteers and non-volunteers, as I said right up front, can help. We need finances to be able to produce, you know, this particular manual here. MCOM publishes it. It's officially published. The cost price on this, I think, was 320 Rand, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm selling it for 350. That was when it was produced a year ago. That's 250 odd pages. That's how much it costs to actually print these types of manuals. And then, of course, you know, running all these virtual sessions, etc., there is a cost implication. And you guys, as registered volunteers and non-volunteers, can reach out to businesses, to companies and other parties and solicit donations. Now, we are a registered public benefit organization, which means that we can, in actual fact, provide a Section 18A receipt, and anybody, company or personal, can claim that money back against their tax liability at the end of the financial year. So there is a tax benefit to it, but we do need finances in order to carry this out. Where do we stand at the moment? I think we are about 83 or 84, somewhere around there, volunteers that are currently registered. with disaster relief CERT. The majority are in Joburg. I've got Potch, Nigel, Benoni, Pretoria, whoever I missed, Free State and Cape Town. I've got a volunteer. I think he's still down in Durban, but he was too busy to build the teams down there. So you can help with recruiting neighbors, friends, family, anybody over the age of 16 to get involved. But you can also approach businesses and companies and everything else and ask them to make donations into the account that we can utilize it for training. That has now become critical. And then, of course, communities as a whole should get involved in the Community Emergency Radio Network, which we will discuss under a separate session altogether. So, that being said, I know we started 10 minutes late. I'm going to leave the floor open for the next 5 or 10 minutes to hear if you guys have got any questions, or otherwise, let me see if I can answer them. We will do a follow-up meeting with this. Hopefully more people will attend. The 3 of you, 4 of you, 5 of you, whoever's with you on this meeting, perhaps share info, insight, whatever the case might be, on the groups. Grow the groups, get people involved. That way we will, in actual fact, be able to carry things out in a far more efficient and effective manner. And I think that, if you take a look at the period of the water crisis, and when I opened up the water crisis relief group, I think out of the 1,000-odd people that actually did come and go on the group, I think they did benefit from the information alone that was being shared. Some people still battled with obtaining water, but others, in actual fact, were informed to the point whereby they knew that they would have to make alternate arrangements or where to collect water, that type of thing. It's another area where we can fit in. So on that note, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to start with Nokolo. See, I've got to try and get this right. Any questions from you?
No questions from me. I think everything has kind of been answered. I'm okay.
All right, good stuff. By the way, does your video work? And you just introduce yourself so that we know who and what and how. I mean, that's me.
It does work. I should not be on camera, but here we go. Let me see.
Okay,
There
there
you
we go. Much better.
Yeah, no, it does work.
Hey, it's so much nicer to put a face to the voice. Eh?
Okay, I'm in your group.
Good stuff. Let's go on to Cindy and Segi. I don't know if you're both there or if only one of you is there.
Hi, Chad. No, we both are here. We found this session to be very informative. I mean, we never realized that we're actually living on an earthquake fault line. It's something to digest, and I think your initiatives are great. I just wish that maybe there was a lot more community participation in things like this. We will try to support where we can, and let's see what we can do with that. Thanks, Chad.
Okay, good stuff. Cindy, anything from your side?
Just one thing. I was thinking, like, in a real situation when a disaster hits, should we as a community maybe start doing like collections of blankets, clothing, foods that are not perishable, like cans, and maybe someone, if they've got space, to store things in an emergency like that. So we have to start. Imagine something hits tomorrow. We got nothing.
Turn your video on. I need to see your face because I'm laughing.
My light is off here, so you're gonna see me in darkness.
There you go. Right. You see this big smile. You'll understand why in a minute. I needed to get your expression as well. It's all fair and well when we do undercover Zoom meetings, but we don't really get the gist of where we are. Okay, is there anything else you'd like to add to your collections of clothing, etc.?
I don't know. I'm trying to think, how do we get people involved? You know, because you really do need people. And how many people were on the call? 3. So that's sad.
Okay, I'm gonna make a note of sad, and I'll cover that in
That's
closing. Thanks, Cindy. Angela, it's your
Hi.
turn.
Well, you know, if I actually didn't even know that this disaster relief cert actually existed until the water shutdown actually took place. So how many people in this area actually know that you're actually running this initiative? Do you not maybe try and put together some sort of fun day or just an information day just to get more awareness out there?
All right, so let's see what happened to your video.
I don't do video.
You can't hide away.
I don't do video, I don't do photos. I refused to take a Barbie photo at work yesterday. And I said, no, don't do photos. I'm
Yeah,
not very
no.
photogenic.
No, it's got nothing to do with photogenic. Okay, let me cover this. You're talking about awareness, yeah.
Chad, before you go on, I think Angela's suggestion is a very good one. Maybe like how they have a fete going on for Women's Day today and selling biltong nogal. I think
Aish.
maybe we should I think we should actually have an events day like that, and to get the community together, and even if it means like we buying stands and paying for stands and selling food and all these riffraffs, whatever, just to get people out there and get them aware. I don't know, some kind of, doesn't have to be a fete, but like have something out in a sports ground, getting security companies having tables and discussing things. People, I don't know how else to get the people out. I tried to organize a bra in my street. My God, only one person responded.
Did they bring
What street do you live in, Cindy, if you don't mind me asking? Where do you live, maybe also?
Wilkie and Rowan
Oh, which area?
in Constantia Cliff.
Oh, in Const. Okay.
Yeah.
Nicola,
So,
you
yeah, I think
said
that's a very good suggestion.
Nicola, you said you where again?
I'm in Radio Co.
Radio Corp, and Angela, you
Yeah.
in Discovery, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. I'm opposite the Scout Hall in Bird and Berkeley.
All right. So you see, this is what I like to see. And even though it might only be 3 of us, you know, or 3 of you at least, this is where it starts. And Segi, you said you found it informative, which is great. Now that's the type of thing that needs to go out on the group. Look, Cindy and Segi, you guys know about, you know, this constant bickering that was taking place on the Constantia Kloof and Surrounds group. I mean, that was done deliberately to break down everything with regards to uniting the community as a whole. And I think that the weekend before last, that intense discussion on the Poppy Act, funny enough, if you really noticed what happened there, nobody left the group. Even though the discussion took place between a couple of, 3 or 4 people and myself in particular, one of the other guys actually went and got the information that I knew existed, but I was busy, right? I'm in the process of doing an opinion proposal to ICASA for changes to the regulations. So my mind was actually caught up, and I was trying to work through that and deal with the Poppy Act at the same time. And that type of conversation is the kind of conversation that we should be holding on the Constantia Kloof and Surrounds group, where we have a general chat about it. And I think that if our conversations are going to be informative and productive, I'm just listening to what's banging outside my place now. If those type of conversations do take place and they are, productive and informative, not during working hours, that's not a good time at all, but like over the weekend, early morning, late afternoon, people that are scrolling through and they're learning something out of it. I think then the group becomes a far more, or the WhatsApp group itself becomes a far more effective tool with regards to creating awareness and also sharing info. Then, with regards to having meetings and creating awareness and fates and that type of thing, in 2018, when we officially launched as MCOM Assist CERT, we actually put up a tent and a full-blown radio station up at Florida High for Reggie's Toy Fair. And it takes a lot to do it. I mean, even there, I needed 10 volunteers minimum. It took us 2 hours to set up. The equipment had to be set up. The mast had to be installed. It took like an hour and a half just to get a 20-meter mast up in the air. We had the amateur radio station there, that type of thing. Now, yes, it can be done. We've actually got a full-blown gazebo and marketing tool, which was donated to CERT. We originally formed, or at least I originally formed CERT as a business-based organization under the name of MCOM Assist CERT. And then last year, after registering as an NGO, non-profit company, and PBO, we changed the name to Disaster Relief CERT to be more informative and descriptive of what we in actual fact are working on. Okay, Nicolo dropped off there. Right, so collections of clothing, etc., that type of thing. The question was asked, should we in actual fact do this? The answer is yes, and the answer is bloody no. I'm not joking. At a later stage in another meeting, I think this must be brought up as a practical example in terms of training, where we as Red Cross actually learned our lesson during the 1987 KZN floods, and donations were collected in Joburg that were shipped down to, I think we shipped down something like 60 or 70 tons of clothing. So that'll give you an idea. So the question again about, collection of clothing and things like that, the answer is yes, but most definitely no. Again, it must be done under a controlled environment and only after certain training has been undertaken. The other example, good practical example I've got there is when a crowd of people were in actual fact evacuated or moved off of a certain piece of land out in the Four Ways area, which funny enough became Four Ways Mall. There were certain items, relief items that were brought in, and I flicked the poor woman upside down and told her where to get off. And she left in a huff and took all of the stuff with her. But that's quite a good story to tell. Not a good one, but a brilliant one, actually. Community participation is always a problem, whichever way we look at it. And, if you take a look at just what's happened on the Constantia Kloof and Surrounds group in particular, there's a lot of skeptical people out there. I mean, I've got a skill, and even though I've got a skill, it gets challenged. There's other people that have got skills out there, and even they get challenged. So that does become a problem. And, out of 4,500 people, if you have a look at how many people pitched up at the church today during this event, well, maybe it was 200, but 200 people could be made aware of certain things. And in order to put up the gazebo and that, it takes manpower, it takes volunteers. And then, of course, it is always a good way of socializing for the volunteers, so that there is definitely not out of the picture. For me, as I sit at the moment, the majority of my volunteers, well, I've only got, I think there's 5 now, 5 volunteers, registered volunteers in Constantia Kloof. and one other radio amateur who's not actually active on air. I'm the only radio amateur sort of between here and Honeydew. The closest guy that we've got is in Honeydew, and then we got one in Discovery. Oh yes, I got one on the other side of the fire station here, but he's not a registered volunteer either. So the community participation is something that definitely has to be dealt with, and it is definitely something to be considered. And I think that, you know, within the communities, when we've got a group of volunteers like Discovery, Angela, if you can bring 20 people together in Discovery, then of course, you know, you get your guys that are on the team to come and collect the gazebo and take the gazebo and set something up there at the Scout Hall or at the church or whatever events you guys have got going, that type of thing, and you grow the awareness that way. Cindy, Segi, same thing applies our side. We move it forward that way. You know, do we really have that amount of or a high number of events that this could be done at? I don't know. What I would like to do, and I've been in discussions, or at least have started discussions with the city of Johannesburg, is to hold a disaster preparedness sort of workshop. I'm just a little bit concerned as to how many people would pitch. Because of what I have experienced through social media, also with regards to what I've experienced when it comes to WhatsApp group, well, not only WhatsApp, but social media administrators, how they tend to block information and the flow of information to their members. I mean, we've seen that, you know, with the CKRF, Kloofendal threw me off of their groups. I even got thrown off of the advertising group because I'm advertising relief products or products used to prepare residents and, you know, that type of thing. So there's a lot of negativity, but that's been sort of put before us to prevent, but we need to prevail and continue. With regards to, yeah, that covered the awareness, that they covered the community, and SAD, yeah, it is.
What about training as well for like teaching people first aid, how to resuscitate people? I know I did it so many years ago. I'm sure I forgot
Cindy,
how to do all that.
I've got an arrangement with DMB Consultants. He's also an ex-Red Cross member. Funny enough, his father trained me in general first aid almost 40 years ago. And today, Darren is actually one of the critical care assistants or one of the CCA class graduates. And we have now for the last 7 months put together a training day, or at least the 4 or 5 days required for level 3 training, which I've been putting out on the Constantia Kloof group and other areas, and we've had no response to the advertisements at all. So as we sit at the moment, the capability of training from my premises is first aid, basic firefighting, CPR, stop the bleed, tactical emergency casualty care, radio communications, both on public, basic radio communications, induction training, disaster area damage assessment, wide area network communication capabilities, voice over IP. We've got all of these things that we can train our community in, and our volunteers. And of course, our volunteers, in actual fact, need to you know, come forward and say, look, you know, this is the training that we need, etc. So there is a lot that we can do, but I can't do it for 1 or 2 people. I need to do it for a much bigger number of people. Otherwise, you know, it doesn't make it worthwhile at all, unfortunately. So I think that basically covers the questions that you guys and girls raised. Hopefully I've answered them, and let's see what we're going to do moving forward.
Okay. All right. That was good.
I'll make the video available and hopefully people will go and look at the video. And of course, I'll share the link with you guys. Also share the link with people that in your group. Angela, for example, you probably on various other discovery groups that you can share info on. And sorry, I've just got to have a look at this.
I think Angela said she's from Radio Corp, right?
No, Nicolo is from Radio Cop. Angela is from the Discovery side of town. Eh?
Oh, okay.
I'm just seeing what Councillor Finn is saying. Yeah, okay, I'll read that just now. That doesn't sound too good. So yeah, now moving forward, my appeal to you is share the information, share the links, share everything that I put out, and let's see if you guys can also help me grow the teams. And Nicolo actually did send a chat through to say that she had a class to attend, so she bailed out. Please help me to get the info out and really seriously consider registering as a volunteer, that we have got you on book. We do have to report our numbers to disaster management, and that goes up all the way through to national level, just so that we know, what we can in actual fact might be able to call upon in times of need, whatever the need might be. This wasn't a short-term plan. This is definitely long-term. And my request to everybody who's watching the video is to seriously consider registering. And I think on that note, I'm going to bid you all farewell and say thank you very much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Okay, good night, Chad. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Cindy.
Thanks. Okay. Bye.
Cheers, Cindy. Cheers, Siggy. Thanks, Angela.